What will Malik Nabers do for an encore after his breakout explosive rookie season as a wide receiver one? Will the quarterback situation affect him? And is Cam Skattebo the sleeper running back you need to have? We tell you why on this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. Unfortunately, my co-host, Michelle Madjuk of NFL.com, is still under the weather, so we're going to close the week looking at the New York Giants and their 2025 outlook. So get well soon, Michelle. Hopefully we'll be all good to go next week as we continue plowing through the divisions and looking at the fantasy football outlook of all 32 teams. We will wrap up the NFC East today. If you missed any of our previous shows looking at the Cowboys, Eagles, or Commanders, those are up now, as well as some other divisions and archive teams. So check that out on our feed. But today is all about the Giants and big offseason for the Giants. A lot of changes. They blew up their quarterback room. We're going to see how that will affect Malik Nabers after his big-time rookie season last year as a first-round rookie in the real draft. So we'll look at that. We'll look at Cam Skattebo, a very intriguing running back sleeper. We tell you why that you should be drafting him in all your new leagues here in 2025 behind Tyrone Tracy Jr. Then we'll look at the quarterback situation. Is there anything we can gather beyond the dynasty stash for Jaxson Dart in that group between Russell Wilson, Jameis, Winston, and Dart? So all that is ahead on today's show. So let's dive right into it with Malik Nabers. He is the superstar Giant. He's the new Odell Beckham Jr. Odell just came on the scene, burst there, and was a dominant player. Also out of LSU, Nabers comes here, puts it all together as a clear number one receiver, does not disappoint. We did have Marvin Harrison Jr. not look good, but the other two receivers here were immediately effective, both out of LSU, keeping up that theme here with Nabers. And Brian Thomas Jr. kind of continuing the tradition we've seen with the top wide receiver in fantasy, Jamar Chase, and the one right not too far behind him in Justin Jefferson. So Nabers is the latest elite prospect from the Fighting Tigers. And let's look at his season last year. Wide receiver 8 on average in half-point PPR, so very firmly a middle pack wide receiver 1 in terms of the top 12, how you look at it in 12-team league, 3 wide receiver start leagues. And he was wide receiver 7 total. Right now, he's been bumped up a notch to wide receiver 6, only behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and just have Nico Collins after him on the board. Now, I think there's a big separation. I look at St. Brown and I look at Nico Collins. They're in the same tier right behind that elite group that includes Chase and Jefferson. And the guys that you look at, CeeDee Lamb would be in that mix as well. But I think Malik Nabers has a chance to do what Jamar Chase did, win the Triple Crown at some point in his career. I would say that this is still a good value for him, right? I mean, he broke out, and this was with a terrible, I mean, I'm just not selling that enough, awful quarterback situation last year. Daniel Jones was a lame duck. We saw him. He had to end the season on the Vikings. Now he's gone to Indianapolis to compete for that job with Anthony Richardson. So he was out, and then they were trying to pivot to Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito, and we know – look, there were some flashes with DeVito. There were some flashes with Drew Lock, who had the strongest arm of that bunch. But overall, Nabers worked with garbage quarterback play and really still came through. So now you blow up that entire room. Jones is gone, as well as Lock and DeVito mostly. You have now a new room with Jaxson Dart, your first-round pick, who everyone expects to potentially redshirt this season with his upside, because they have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Winston started a lot of games, so we've seen it in the past couple of years. He's kind of a plug-and-play guy. It was in Cleveland last year. With Wilson, he was the starter in Pittsburgh. So you got two veterans who have a history of starting. Wilson, not too far removed from his Seahawks days, but definitely that Broncos-Steelers stint really brought him down. Well, Winston is basically the younger version of Joe Flacco, a gunslinger first-round pick who's around to just throw the ball around, and Jaxson Dart is a high upside quarterback. So when you look at that, I think these still, when you look at the combined nature of these three quarterbacks, they're still better, right, than what you had last year. Even if we had to go to Jaxson Dart, he has more talent. I mean, right away. I mean, you look at the comparison; it's not even close. I mean, say Drew Lock was kind of the third quarterback in that system last year. I mean, you look at the skill set of Dart; it's off the charts, and then the experience of Winston and Wilson, way better than what they had with DeVito and Jones. And really, it comes down to that. I mean, Jones was still pretty effective at getting the ball to the go-to guy in the end. Wilson is kind of fickle, right, about that. He's going to target him in his own right, in his own way. He's not going to force the ball too far outside when he doesn't need to. He's a little bit gun shy now in terms of protecting the ball. He's always been a little bit like that, where he's not too much concerned with gunslinging, but protecting the ball. Where with Winston, we know he's going to let it fly and just say, look, go up and get it. We've seen that effect with Jerry Jeudy, with two quarterbacks there in Flacco and Winston in Cleveland. So now you look at Malik Nabers. I think they'll just throw it up to him quite a bit if it's Winston. Now, if you get Jaxson Dart in there, then he's going to treat him as a security blanket, a guy that gets open all over the field. They don't really have that consistent tight end yet. Theo Johnson, we'll see if he can emerge. But Malik Nabers would be the rookie security blanket all over the field. So we're actually in really good shape with any of these quarterbacks. And keep in mind, once again, the finish with just absolutely nothing there at quarterback last year as wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8. So why wouldn't it at least bump up one spot? I think that might be kind of conservative, right? When you look at this, and there's a chance that they'll get tired of Wilson's antics and they'll move on and just go to Winston and play Dart whenever it's ready. That's a great thing here. You think Wilson is the guy that we want here, but Wilson, again, a little bit picky, a little bit kind of discerning at quarterback and how he wants to target players. But these guys are not going to care as much in different ways. That, look, Dart wants to look good. He's going to throw to Nabers. Winston also wants to look good and take advantage of the best player on the field, and he's not going to care about the coverage, right? I think you might have Wilson be a little gun shy, want to be efficient, maybe take off and run a bit. Winston is not going to do that. He's going to try to extend plays and throw it downfield. Dart can do that. He can run and take off, but you also know he's going to trust Nabers. Again, they do have Darius Slayton back and some other weapons you can kind of look at, but really the guy that's going to stand out, dominate targets once again, is Malik Nabers. So when you weigh all that, I think it's really good for him. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown definitely is very consistent. We're hoping Nabers gets to that level where he's consistent in the top 8 as well. But again, handful of guys only ahead of him this year. And again, I think he has the wide receiver 3 upside. Really, he could be the wide receiver 1 on the board. It would not surprise me. That's how good he is. I think the only thing that would hold him back is that Chase has Joe Burrow. We'll see. Justin Jefferson might come down a little bit because of the switch of quarterback to J.J. McCarthy, but he's made it work with Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold. So, again, of those 3, Chase definitely is the best QB in solid ground here that we know is not a wild card or variable in Joe Burrow. While these other 2 situations are a little in flux, we do know it's going to be J.J. McCarthy, Minnesota, so a little bit more knowledge of that situation. But just a little bit of ambiguity about the Giants quarterback situation. Says, look, Nabers is pretty high, but I think you can still get good value on him if you invest as wide receiver 6 pick early in the second round of fantasy drafts. I think he can go and give you better return on that. So it may not be like last year where we're taking him a little bit lower as a wide receiver 1 and you got that massive bump, but he's still going to be rather effective and really make a pleasing pick right where he's ranked overall this season in the consensus and in most league formats. So we will look at then the rookie that we're all eyes on this year. Yeah, it's Abdul Carter as well on defense, but we're looking at Cam Skattebo for fantasy purposes. We've seen players like this really excel in fantasy in the past. And again, will it be a second rookie who takes off as a valued commodity in fantasy football? We'll explore Skattebo versus their sophomore running back Tyrone Tracy after this break. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, we're still getting more action with the NBA playoffs. We know the Thunder are waiting for their opponent from the East to play in the finals, but that East series could be a ways from getting done because the Knicks came through big time, took care of that 4-point spread, and took it to a game 6. They're down 3-2, so the series will return to Indianapolis and back to New York if there's a game 7. So a lot more extra action for you to get in on FanDuel Sportsbook now before it's too late. So look, you could have a maximum of a lot of games coming up here with 7 and then potentially 3 more in this situation. So we really liked this going on with that. They're in full swing every night. You know, you're going to get highlights and worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't miss moments, and we've had that a lot. This series is turning out to be epic between the Knicks and Pacers. Whether it's game-winning shot, breakout player, there's never been a better time to get on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Check it out. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Here we have those handful of games left. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you would get $200 in bonus bets there for you to play with only on FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's continue the show here. We looked at Malik Nabers, sophomore. Is he going to be a sophomore bump? We've decided on bump over slump. Now let's look at Cam Skattebo here and see where he's ranked in relation to Tyrone Tracy. Now, Tracy is the RB 26 from last year in total scoring. In average, in half-point PPR, he was RB 32. This year, he's kind of split the difference right in between those numbers at RB 31 in the half-point PPR rankings. But if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll find Cam Skattebo there at RB 39. When I look at this, there's already some doubt if Tracy's going to hold a key role. And we just heard some news and a report that was rather interesting that the Giants are exploring this as a committee approach. We've already heard that a little bit when they invested the pick in Skattebo, and they were looking for a running back in this class. I think Devin Singletary's fading. He, by the way, is ranked as RB 71, so not even on the board. They also have Eric Gray hanging around, but they love Skattebo. And what Skattebo might actually get is the key high leverage points in fantasy football, where they've talked about him in a third down role because he's very dynamic as a receiver, can make some big plays, add an element that they don't have with Tracy. Tracy's a good short area receiver and is quick in the open field, but Skattebo is a little bit special in that area, and he's just a downright straight up playmaker. So when we look at that, I mean, yeah, Skattebo could easily get the third down. We know he's going to hold up in pass blocking and work a lot at that, so they can trust him in that capacity quite a bit as a rookie. Now, the question is he going to get the key carries? He's also a big dude who scored a lot at Arizona State. So his size is great. His speed, I think, is still underrated. His quickness is there. So the other thing I know with Skattebo, he's going to win over the fans and coaches pretty quickly. He's going to put in high effort. He's just a guy that, again, just produces and knows how to make big plays. A lot of players, offensive skill-wise, do not have that kind of nose for just always finding ways to put up numbers, but Cam Skattebo is definitely that. Like, the split role is very good news here. It's not great news if you got Tyrone Tracy and you thought, okay, we're in business for some big things for him after all the flashes he showed last year as a runner and receiver, especially as they move on and Devin Singletary is faded from this offense. But when I look at it now, I think Brian Daboll is going to look at Skattebo and say, look, I can do a lot more things with him on the field. I can use him as a fullback. I can put him out as a wide receiver if I need to. So there's more versatility that you're going to get with the Giants if you have Skattebo on the field versus Tyrone Tracy. And I think Daboll and Mike Kafka are going to design some plays with what Skattebo can do for sure. So again, this all tells me, again, the ranking that's close says that Skattebo is a must draft. He's a sleeper that you want in a lot of leagues. And look, right now he's in the flex position when you look at 39, but I think he could be a lot higher than that. Like, I think you look at anywhere from 25 to 36, you would consider more of a flex running back, but I think you can have a little bit more value, play the matchups with him, get some nice return on investment. He is definitely a very adept receiver. He's good at protecting, so that can keep him on the field, especially if Dart has to start. I think you'll see more Skattebo because of his blocking. They might be okay with different quarterback if the quarterback gets better protection, Wilson and Winston. But I think definitely if you see Dart out there, I think you'll also see the fellow rookie Skattebo as they turn the page on this youth movement in New York and just want to go in that direction, whether or not this is a lame duck season for Daboll and Kafka here with this situation with their quarterback. I think they'll give them a little longer because the quarterback has changed. The whole room has changed. We know that. But Skattebo is going to keep part of what they do. He's a good check down guy as well, so he could rack up some cheap catches on the short area, can make some big plays after the catch, has, again, receiving sensibilities like a wide receiver. He's got that lineage, and we know he's a big dude who can finish in the red zone. So the Tyrone Tracy might be losing the key elements that you need to succeed in fantasy that we were all hoping that he would get before the drafting of Skattebo. Now I don't see that likely, and Singletary and Gray are just going to be blacked out, and we just look at one of them maybe hanging around as a backup, and I think that would decide Singletary because he did follow Dable, although a few years removed from Buffalo. So Eric Gray definitely is an uphill battle to make this team on the back end with the presence of Skattebo behind Tracy. So really excited. And again, why are you banging the table for Skattebo again? He's a rare athlete. They want to get him on the field. I'm not going to say he's going to be like Taysom Hill, right, where they have some direct snaps. Not necessarily, but they're going to design some plays with him in mind. And I think he's going to be the guy you want to stash here. Like, I'd much rather stash Skattebo as a hot sleeper, not only for redraft leagues in 2025, but for the future, than looking at what I might be able to get in the short term with Tyrone Tracy. I'm just not interested. Again, he also has a capped ceiling because he's a good receiving back, but again, we didn't see a lot of punch in the red zone from him either last year. So Skattebo definitely has the higher overall ceiling. It all comes down to the opportunities. Can he steal 12 to 15 touches per game or get to that level at some point before the end of the season? I think it's definitely possible. And again, these type of this guys who have the ability to make plays, score, get good chunk yardage, they're going to get it done again in the NFL. And Skattebo, I think, is going to show that he's a plus athlete. It didn't matter that he's facing tougher competition. He's going to get it done in a unique way here in the NFL. Now, tying all this together with Nabers and Skattebo, if you're going to work to them in the passing game, and Darius Slayton and the tight ends and all that, is who's starting your quarterback. So they did use a first-round pick on Dart. You got Wilson and Winston in there. How's this going to shake out, and what effect is it going to have on these offensive skill players? We'll do that here to wrap up the show in the week of shows right after this quick break. All right, it is time to wrap up our offseason look at the 2025 New York Giants. We've talked about Malik Nabers, Cam Skattebo. We're positive in the energy and vibes. Now, we want to be more positive on Jaxson Dart. I wish they would just let him start right away. I don't think they're going to totally close the door on the rookie starting out of Ole Miss. I mean, he's dynamic. He's a very good athlete. He's got a big arm, good accuracy, a lot of things that you're looking at. But I think it could be a slow play where Dable and Kafka know the pressure's on to kind of win games and save some face here early in the season. So it may not work out that way, and it still could backfire, and they have to make change anyway because they're not winning, and they can turn the page to 2026. But when you look at it, there are some veteran options that you cannot ignore here. So right now, you would expect Winston starts in week one. Or Sir Wilson starts in week one. I think there's an outside shot that Winston does, and it's hard to say these guys name fast: Winston, Wilson, Wilson, Winston. But I would expect both of them to make starts at some point. Wilson, again, has had a little bit of durability issues of late. He had that year in Seattle where he had to bow out, and Geno Smith took over. Then we saw Denver. He got banged up. He wasn't quite the same. The Steelers, he got bounced around and beat up a bit here. So I'd say Wilson starts, but I don't think they're going to have a very long leash on Wilson because they want to see what they have. Winston is still a capable guy, and he might have better backup makeup, quite honestly, than Wilson to just come in there and handle it and not have an ego and try to push Dart out of the way. He's going to try to help Dart and ease that transition to Dart versus Wilson, I think, is going to try to wrestle this job and try to keep it. It didn't work in the battle versus Justin Fields. Of course, the Steelers moved on from both of those. It didn't work in Denver. So Wilson has lost a lot of momentum here, while Winston has gained some. And coming back, his personality, his locker room stuff definitely comes into play, where I think Wilson, there's a little bit of concern with that. So it definitely has a shot to be Winston if they want to open it that way, but I would think I would bank on Wilson kind of being the starter for now. But the question is, how long does it last? If Wilson gets hurt, I think you have to look at Winston if it's early this season. But if it's more in the back half of the season, I think you'd look at Jaxson Dart. Now, the question is Dart a decent pick for redraft stash? I don't think he's worth a pick, but you want to definitely put him on the radar as someone could have some immediate fantasy impact this is the way it would have to go down. Wilson's ineffective and gets benched, and they just realize it's time. Dart's ready, and then he can take over from Winston. I think that's how it would play. So what I'm looking at is it could be very similar to the way you had Russell Wilson makes about 5 to 6 starts here over the course of the season. You get Winston for a handful of games, and then you get Dart to finish the rest of the season. Now, when you look at this, I think we definitely want Winston and Dart to be out there as much as possible to help Malik Nabers and the rest of the skill players. It's just the bottom line. I mean, Dart has shown more upside of late. Again, when you look at this, it was QB 29, QB 30, QB 40. So there was no difference between Wilson and Dart. And you're not going to get anything there with the value with Dart versus Wilson because he's right there. Winston, you're definitely going to get something there with QB 40, but you don't really want that player because he's more of a straight up backup at this point where, again, Wilson would be the incumbent early starter. If he falters, you'd see Winston in there if they don't deem Dart to be ready, and then Dart would go full bore. So I expect Dart to make starts here. I'll just say that in 2025. These two guys are just not going to hold up as well, but they're going to be like a double bridge here and see where we're going. And again, Winston is not going to do the running at all. At this point, Wilson basically is taking away the running. Dart would be taking off and running, so he would cut down on the checkdowns to Skattebo and Tracy if he's in there. And he'd also create some upside because he's a dynamic runner and would open things up in the backfield with his play. So again, when we look at this individually, I think the guy that is clear to go after is Dart. I'm not interested in Winston. Maybe as a pinch streamer if he gets stuck in the right matchups and he ends up being the Giant starter for that particular week, then he could go with him. But I have no interest in Wilson. Value isn't there. I think the upside is there, however, with Dart to take him at QB 30. And again, Dynasty Fantasy makes a lot of sense, right? With the weapons, including Nabers, he's definitely a guy that you want to put in and draft in a lot of those keeper league formats because he could have a big, big role going forward. And we can see flashes of that at the end of this year should he get the starting job. So really excited about this, and we will see how it plays out here for the Giants. Again, when we look at it, I mean, it's tough, right? This team has been letting down offensively, but a lot of it has been they thought they had something in Daniel Jones, gave him a mild contract extension. That didn't work out. He went back to the doghouse, and it didn't work out for him starting for too long last year. So this is where the Giants are. They've done a 180 at quarterback. They've got some weapons here. We just want them to facilitate these weapons, namely Nabers and Skattebo. Like, we're not too interested in the other receivers or tight end here in New York, but definitely we want Nabers, Skattebo, and if Tracy can get some numbers up as a flex, we'll take that as well. So again, I expect to split a quarterback, all three guys making starts, much like we saw with Jones, Locke, and DeVito last year. But again, just by the talent alone of these guys, Wilson's arm, Winston arm, Dart's arm, it's going to be all good for Malik Nabers and just better overall with the offensive production. That's going to create more scoring opportunities as well for those running backs and other skill players in New York. So anyway, this is how we look at the New York Giants. And so again, we looked at the now Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders. If you missed any of that stuff, check it out on our archives. Thank you again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over. We know that, but we're already turning the page to a lot of the prospects in 2026. And the roster moves are still going to keep coming here. We're still waiting for Aaron Rodgers. They're going to stop with this news at some point, but they're not stopping now, and this is when you need to keep up with it. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So a lot of good stuff here with the Giants. Now, in quick summary, Malik Nabers. Is it too rich here for wide receiver 3? I don't think so. You could get him as high as that. Right now, wide receiver 6, that makes him a pretty good deal. Now, Cam Skattebo, another guy we're going to target in a lot of drafts here. RB39, too good of a value here in a lot of drafts where he could give you back-end RB2 or flex potential, so jump on that. And finally, again, I would expect in the end Wilson to still make more starts than the other Giants quarterback this season, but eventually that transition to Dart to start sometime here in 2025. And if Dart's available, I think you have to jump on him in all leagues, but you're not going to draft him. I think you don't draft any of these Giants quarterbacks, see how things play out, and then no Winston or Wilson unless there's a great matchup, and then wait for whenever Dart gets his turn in this offense. So again, this is a pretty good division overall to sum up here. The Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and Commanders, all high-profile teams with some high-profile offensive questions and narratives we wanted to get to. So thanks again so much for listening to Locked On Fantasy Football. We miss you, Michelle. Get well here, and we'll be back with her on our next show, hopefully, and break down another team to start another division for you here on Locked On Fantasy Football for this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you on Monday. Bye, y'all.